Well, that was great. We listened to Nick earlier, and now he has the evening off, so he's happy with the next how the next hour is going to go. But the part of what we wanted to do today was actually bring together like a panel of different people that are doing kind of real life work. I think sometimes with design, what happens is that there's always one. Come on. Is that sometimes people with these fancy Instagram followings get a lot of attention, but actually there's lots of real people that are doing really good work, and those are the people that you really want to hear from, and that's kind of what Design Tree's been about over the last kind of few years, really, to be honest. I'm going to let everyone here introduce themselves. You're in very safe hands with Amy, but we would like some audience participation at some point. It's not going to be karaoke, but you might be asked some things, so be prepared to be involved. Cheers, guys.
Thanks so much, Gareth, and hi everyone. And also thanks to Nick. I really enjoyed the first part of the evening. Hopefully the second part's going to be just as insightful. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Amy Frearson. I'm a journalist and editor. Some of you may know me as editor-at-large for Design, and I also write a little bit for Elle Decoration and EFT, among others. And so, yeah, this part of the evening, we've got 4 fab speakers who are hopefully going to be talking quite candidly in Design Truth style about sort of their experiences and insights into different things, I guess, that hopefully that everyone in this room is facing. And I'm hoping that some of you will also be able to kind of get involved in the conversation. I think I want to encourage you all, if you have a question at any point, please just stick up your hand. We've got another microphone, Brad will bring it over. We want this to be as open a conversation as possible. But I'm going to start by introducing all of our speakers. So I'm going to make sure I get everyone's job titles correctly. So sitting here next to me is Gareth McNeil, Director of Design and Innovation at Joseph. Hopefully I've got these correct. Yep. We've got Alba Bayona, Head of Design at Kingfisher. We have Rowan Williams, who is Creative Lead at Panasonic Design Flux. And we have Matt Plested, who is Design Director for the Fuel, and only knew he was doing this talk this morning, so it's very bravely jumped in. Be kind to him. To start with, I'm just going to come to each of you in turn and ask you to just tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what you do, so that they know a little bit more. I'm sure you know a lot of them anyway, but it's a good place to begin. So Gareth, I'm going to come to you first.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I'm Gareth. I am Industrial Design Director at Joseph. Our kind of main ethos is about solving problems in the home. So the team that I manage are constantly coming up with new ideas for different categories that we kind of sell products in. So the main focus is about understanding human behaviour and trying to find problems or opportunities that we can turn into winning designs that are going to make a difference in people's lives.
And tell us a little bit more about how that actually how you kind of work internally. Obviously I don't want to give away any too many of your secrets, but yeah. What does that kind of working process look like at Joseph?
So we spend a lot of time before we put pen to paper and trying to understand people's problems, frustrations in a particular space in the home. Mm-hmm. We now kind of operate in basically all parts of the home. The business is 20 years old, so when we started, we were predominantly focused in the kitchen, but now we operate in laundry space, we do products in waste, we do utility products as well, so we're starting to branch into other parts of the home, and we've got other new kind of exciting developments going on, but it all comes back to trying to identify problems and solve them with really clever solutions. So we spend a lot of time going over and over what's the problem and do we have a strong enough idea, and that is where a big focus for the design team is just trying to repeat and trying to get those ideas as strong as we possibly can before we even get into industrial design aesthetics and details. It's more about what is the consumer benefit, what can we do that's hopefully going to be better than the competition, but also offer some added value to the consumer to give them a reason to come and buy our product over someone else's.
And tell us also a little bit more about you yourself and how you ended up in this role. What's your background?
So, fairly traditional background. I studied product design in Glasgow, then moved south, did a degree in South Wales, in Cardiff. Then I've been in consultancy at the beginning of my career, so 3-4 years working in consultancy. Actually, originally with Matt in the Alloy, back in 2003. And then moved into more retail-based roles where I've worked in home-based, doing furniture and lighting, then moved into mother care, working on in-house own brand travel products and baby feeding and those types of products. And then the last 11 years I've been with Joseph, doing what I described now. So, yeah.
Fantastic. And I'm going to come to you now. Would you introduce yourself in a little bit more detail and what you do to the audience?
Yes, so I'm Alba Bayona and I'm head of design in Kingfisher, the DIY retailer. So Kingfisher is the parent company of several DIY retailers. You will know Screwfix and B&Q. And we mostly develop products in-house for our own brands. And we are split, we're different heads of, we sort of work on different categories. So I mostly work on kitchens and workwear and footwear with my team of industrial designers.
And I'm fascinated with understanding what it sort of looks like working on the inside of such a big organisation. Not just B&Q and Screwfix, you have so many other companies as well. So maybe you can give a little bit of insight into how that actually works.
Yeah, so it's been a very interesting journey because when I started at Kingfisher, the design team was actually really new. They had decided to start developing product in-house when we started. So it's mostly been all around sort of bringing product development to such a big corporation and setting up all these processes and methods and coaching teams, etc. And we've now got to a point where we actually have quite a lot of products in the market, and our process is not very dissimilar to what Gareth was describing in terms of focusing a lot on user insights and also like recently also sort of like trends research, to then a big part of my role is to sort of extract opportunities from that can feed into the product development roadmaps.
And again, tell us a little bit about you and your background and how you ended up in this role.
So I graduated in engineering and industrial design back in Spain, where I'm from, and then I bought a one-way ticket to London as soon as I graduated, which was quite crazy, but just did it. And then I got my first job at Monitor Audio designing speakers, but the offices are actually in Essex, so I used to commute every day there, and then I decided that I wanted to make it in London. So after I had worked in-house there for some years, I decided to work in London, and I wanted to try out freelancing. And then I also set up, as a side project, my own jewelry brand with Terence Woodgate, the furniture designer, and we challenged a lot of different designers to create jewelry pieces, and there I learned a lot about how all the different parts of a business come together and how commerciality and brand awareness, etc. So I then really started to apply that into my other jobs. I work for Black and Bloom. It was next door to each other. Black and Bloom as a freelancer, and then I started to work at Kingfisher, where I started as an industrial designer and then became head of design.
Rowan, you're up next.
Cool. Yeah, so hello everyone. Thanks again, Brad, for inviting us here. My name's Rowan Williams, so I'm the creative lead as part of the Panasonic Design Flux setup, just based off of Borough Market. We've got a small studio there. I'll start from my beginning, beat the question afterwards. So if I go back at the very start of sort of design and what interested me about design, as a person was really interested in art, sciences, languages, found the love of design through some really influential people at my school, people who sort of surrounded me, I think, really were quite inspirational with what design means, what design can do, what design can impact. And my kind of pivotal moment in my very, very early days, was watching a TV series, which was on Channel 4, I think in the late 80s, early 90s, by a couple of guys called Richard Seymour and Dick Powell, called Better by Design. That confirmed this utter passion and direction that wanted to take of becoming a designer. I think the 2 episodes that I watched were designing a shopping trolley and designing the Wonder Bra. So 2 quite obscure different topics to explore, but incredible to see the value and the potential that design could have in society, in the business. So yeah, industrial design background, studied up in Loughborough Design School, and go through the general process of going to things like new designers, the chance there of being sort of on the market of talent that people could join, and there was an opportunity that arose, which was for Seymour Powell. I applied, I was taken on board as an intern, and worked so hard to try and get that first job as soon as I put my foot through the door at Seymour Powell. And I think it's a testament of just loving design. It doesn't feel like work, it's just wanting to do something meaningful with what your line of work is, but at the same time, yeah, really trying to get that first job. So anyway, there, 6 years, 7 years, working on some amazing different companies, amazing different brands, kind of the traditional big old anchor clients, but then being flown off to the other side of the world to present in multi-billionaires' cinema rooms underground, which was amazing experiences, but lots of different stuff learnt along the way. So trained in industrial design, but along the way, as I'm sure many of you are also and have been through the process, learning lots of different things about design. And then, yeah, 6 years ago, had the opportunity to join an ex-colleague of mine, Japanese guy, Takei Ikeda, to join Panasonic. And this was under the kind of the sponsorship and the authorship of the design director in Panasonic to set up a new division called Panasonic Design Flux. And our responsibility as a team now is really to use the power of design to ignite and inspire decision-making and be a facilitator of sort of C-suite level people in Panasonic to make sure that we're establishing the right vision and direction for the Panasonic brand. So Panasonic's like 100 years old when I joined 6 years ago, so it's now 106 years old. So a lot of stuff's changed over that time. So we've got to use the role of design leadership to go beyond just designing things and designing new processes, new ways of thinking, to actually implement really significant change in a business and bring lots of people across along on the way. I'll keep it there for this moment.
Fantastic. I'm going to ask you to expand on one thing, which is just to kind of, I guess, give a little bit more detail about what the sort of Flux department does in addition, like separately from the rest of Panasonic.
Yeah, I mean, we're in somewhat of a bit of a unique position because obviously the majority of Panasonic is 250,000 people big. Most of those teams are based in Japan, but our responsibility is to bring, through our expertise and experience in more like insight, strategy, creation, and storytelling. These are kind of like the 4 pillars that are really kind of pushed from our team. We do lots of global insight that can inspire decision-making at a C-suite level. We do lots of strategic distillation of that insight, which then helps provide the direction, like what the opportunities should be. We then do creation, which is visualizing, not just providing words and documents, but actually showing what the potential could be based off of those opportunities that we've established. And then we do a lot of storytelling, and that might be internal, that might be trying to find the best tools to communicate our thinking, but it could also be external. So we get heavily involved in things like CES in Las Vegas to help start communicating some of this new direction and vision that Panasonic's taking. We try and find a nice balance between saying as much as we can internally with what just needs to be said externally to kind of start teasing this direction that people are moving towards.
And it must, I guess there must be both sort of challenges and sort of difficulties, basically being a sort of a satellite team in a company like Panasonic where, you know, so much of what they do is in Japan.
Yeah.
You know, I guess in some ways there must be freedoms, in others you must sometimes feel like your little experimental studio on your own.
Yeah, I mean, we're given space to breathe and move. I mean, the team in London at its fullest is 15. And I say fullest because we have the potential to scale up and scale down depending on the talent that we need. But then, as I said, we've got many other people in the Panasonic team in Japan that we can use as our resource as well. But yeah, the key thing though for us is having the sponsorship from a C-suite level, because that is almost our security. That's our kind of way of making sure that we're not just a satellite studio, which may have been in the past, but actually we are very much ingrained within a strategic level in Panasonic.
Fantastic. Matt, you're up next.
Well, it's quite hard to follow that great intro, Rowan. It's really good. So maybe a bit different to these guys. So I come from the agency space. I spent over 25 years working in industrial design agency. Had 1 year where I decided to basically go in-house and try that, and just did a year. Went back to agency. Basically, 2018, set up our own business, which me and another guy basically founded, having run a previous agency for 10 years. So we'd been basically the directors and the people running the day-to-day of an agency. We started in 2018 to form our own business called The Fuel. And it was a case of like stepping back and saying everything that we've learned in our journey to get there and running a reasonable sort of 25-person agency for 10 years, what would we do if we started again? And we actually created that business having, during a design brief, we actually went and saw potential clients and said to them, if you could do something different with us, what would it be? If you were to ask us basically how you'd like to work with us, what would that be? So we actually gathered a lot of feedback before we started our own business and designed it around basically all the feedback that we gathered externally and also our own feedback to just build something that we wanted to do, that the clients wanted to use, etc. So yeah, the one year I spent in industry was actually with Dyson in 2008, and basically I joined them at a time when industrial design was a bit of a dirty word, but they knew they kind of wanted it. Basically, it's very different now, I'd like to say. But yeah, I was basically there to almost introduce this idea of the kind of customer experience and the visual of the design. But it was at the stage where, for the business, it was quite a big change. So everyone knows kind of the original form follows function, and kind of that's how they originated. So for me, it was an interesting journey, quite a different journey to working in agency.
Fantastic. And tell us a little bit about the type of work that you are now doing.
So basically at The Fuel we specialise in consumer electronics, and that was something that we made a really conscious effort to say, look, this is the work we really enjoy and this is where we think we really add value. We're basically a team that are very experienced, which I think is quite different to a lot of agencies. I think a lot of the agency models is basically about running a senior team with a much younger team, whereas we actually like to work with people with a lot of experience, because we obviously see the value in that and the clients see the value. I mean, there's huge efficiencies in that as well. So we're doing work in for service companies and for basically product companies, quite varied in terms of what we do, but always within consumer electronics.
Fantastic. And I'm going to now kind of bring to sort of a general question, which I guess is going to be quite open-ended, so I hope that you're all ready. But I guess I want to sort of start with just to say, what does the landscape look like in 2024? Which I know is a hard place to start, but it feels like good to sort of, think a little bit about what are the things that are kind of preoccupying you in your business, and what are the sort of things that you're going to be kind of thinking about as we kind of go through the rest of this year. I'm going to come to you first, Gareth.
Yeah, that's a broad one. It's a broad one.
It's a broad question. I just feel like it's a good place.
Yeah, sure. I can run with it. I think the thing that springs to mind is, we've been going 20 years. Joseph as a business, we're kind of in a transition period, essentially, where we're sort of moving to do much more in-house than we've done in the past. So we're shifting now to do more, take on more ownership of the industrial design projects in-house, whereas previously we were using more external agencies and some in-house, so we're doing more in-house. So that's one kind of big opportunity that we are seeing going forward, but also comes with challenges as well. It's a highly ambitious organisation, so one of our challenges at the minute is trying to resource all the things that we want to do, and it's trying to be sensible about how we manage that. And
can I ask what sort of prompted that shift?
The shift to move to in-house.
Yeah.
So it's just been a natural as we've grown. We've wanted to do. We've wanted to have more control over what we're doing. We can be more nimble. We can react to things better. We can build ranges more easily. So there's lots of advantages for us to develop in-house going forward.
Rowan, I'm going to come to you because you've been nodding the most. So it sounds like that's something you've been experiencing a little bit as well.
I think especially this shift towards more sort of in-house facilitation of creative activity. I think because we have such a clear kind of strategy and direction now, sometimes it's easier just to be able to dissipate that within the resource that Panasonic has, just to be able to execute. Sometimes I think that's what's lacking and needed to go for external agencies, because it's that sort of lack of direction and looking for them for the inspiration. But actually now we've been able to facilitate that internally. I think we're able to use external talent more specifically. It's no longer kind of just providing that big brief, come back to us with some ideas. It's like a very, very tight, specific brief that we've been able to curate. So we get the right things coming back. 2024, of what's looking, I mean, for us, it's probably growth for us to start being able to implement a lot of the work that we've been doing over the past 5 years. And actually sort of like implementing now. There's lots of big activities. Panasonic does everything from toothbrushes to hydrogen fuel cell power stations, and literally everything and anything in between. So it's a bit of a challenge to try and establish a direction across so many different people in different divisions. But actually it's starting to speak to the right people in those teams to try and create this kind of consistency or approach. I think it was quite interesting seeing Nick's slide about creating a singular vision. I think can completely resonate with that, but the importance with what we're doing at the moment and this year is making everyone feel like they have contributed to that vision, even though that it might be coming from a singular team or source, because that's what sort of, I think, the importance of togetherness and the importance of collective successes. So hopefully we get to that point by the end of this year when we're reviewing this of what's next for 2025.
Alba, what about you?
So for us, it's similar in a way, but we're a tiny bit behind. So as I said, because we've been through this process, a lot of the work we were doing for the last few years has been developing briefs, and only very recently, especially since I became head of, a lot of the work we've been doing was to prove how we can actually try to explore and predict a little bit far ahead and create those longer term roadmaps. And that's been a big activity for us as heads of, and I think it's been proving to really work, and I think the company have started to learn about what that means and how we can implement it and how it's starting to work. Therefore, then now 2024 is going to be a lot about formalizing that exploration a lot more, because until now it's been about us sort of leading that, and I think a lot of the time people don't quite get what a lot of these strategic explorations or just trying to figure out what it could be means. I think some people outside design might get a bit confused with what goes on with that. So I think only recently the outputs of that have been understood, and we're trying to formalize it a lot more across different stakeholders. So I'm quite happy that I think that's going to be something that the team can focus on this year. Also, like I'm changing jobs, so that's something really exciting for me to look forward to. But I'm also feeling really happy that I can leave these sort of methodologies and processes for the team to continue.
So how's your role going to change?
So I'm going to move a little bit up as Associate Director of Design Studio in Kohler Mira for Mira Showers in Cheltenham.
Okay,
Yeah.
Interesting. Matt, how about you?
Yeah, so perhaps a little bit different from an agency perspective. I think we all know that saying, like, hardware is hard, and I think we work with a lot of customers that don't have a design facility. They might not even have a design person. they might have engineering, but a lot of service companies we work with actually have virtually nothing. So they have product people, product managers, etc. And I think what's happened in the last few years is digital has become more normal, and we all know that how they've taken the product design title from us, which I studied product design like a lot of the older people here. And basically, I think there's some confusion, I think, sometimes about how hard and long hardware development is. I think, there's a lot of mix-up with, like, in the digital world, this can happen. You can change it at the last minute before you launch it. But you can't do that when you're making something physical. And I think we still have a lot of challenges around trying to educate a lot of customers or potential customers about just how hard and long that task is ahead. And I mean, it's very much what Nick was saying about providing that guidance and trying to make them understand basically that journey to basically producing hardware. And there might be an organisation that's done it before, but the people might not have done it before. The people that you're dealing with may not have run a hardware project before. So I think that's, it's an old thing, but I think it's still there. And I think the digital or the rise of digital kind of almost has made it more difficult for us to explain as to how in the digital world it's easy, you can change it, but you can't change it in a physical way.
That's really, really interesting. I'm curious to know whether anyone else has experienced anything similar or whether that's affecting what you do in any way.
I think definitely what we're doing at the moment is trying to educate key stakeholders what design means, what design is, and I think there's a lot of stuff that goes on which might devalue the importance and the role that design can have, in terms of people just see it as a means of just executing a pretty picture, not understanding the process and the thinking and actually how that can influence and inspire completely abstract areas of a business. Like we're starting to see people in finance approach us and say, well, actually, can you think about how you can improve the way that we're working and the tools that we're working with? We've got people, I regularly travel to Japan and spend time with engineers, teaching them how to best create ideas, best to facilitate workshops. So it's actually a key important part is like, I'm a real champion for the value that design has. And actually, I think lots of people can learn from the way that we think and do things. So I think it's really important that we find the right tools and the right way of speaking to those people to see us almost at the same level as them. I think there's some people who might kind of look down a little bit on design, or they're the people who colour in and draw pretty pictures, and suddenly there's this an amazing product that happens, but we don't know how that comes about. But we need to try and find the way that we can educate people, stakeholders about the importance.
We've been through, sorry.
No, please.
But
it's
been absolutely a very similar journey for us in Kingfisher. It's been how to educate a business who's always bought product off the shelf, what it means to actually develop product. I mean, my colleagues here can tell you when we started, when we were doing like reviews of timelines to develop a project, they would have briefed us for this massive project, and then in the timeline it would say tooling 0 days, and we would be like, what? You don't even, we need to start from right. So we had to really start from scratch. But I think we're really, I'm really happy with where we've got now. That's nailed, and now it's like, what's next?
Do you find as well, and I sort of very aware that I'm kind of asking this question as someone who's very associated with design, which is a big part of where this idea comes from, but I often find that there's a lot of kind of difficulty for people to understand the difference between a conceptual design and a developed design. I think like that seems to be something that I've rarely people seem to understand that, it's one thing to have an idea and then it's quite another to then take it and make it, something that can be marketed and sold. Do you think that's sort of something that's kind of coming up more recently, or something that's just generally just an education that's been needed for a while?
Yeah, it's been made worse by social media, I think. I think people just think that basically, and the ease at which you can put a rendering out of something, right? And I think that we see it sometimes in product development that basically you get fatigue. So basically people on the inside of the project can be in love with a design, an object, whatever, for a while, but then they're still living with it 10 months later, 14 months later, etc. And then they get fatigued because it's like, well, it hasn't changed, it's still the same, and it hasn't come out yet. So I do think that basically the rise of, all the channels where basically you can instantly put stuff out without the consideration and all the timelines that go into the R&D like definitely that again, there's a mix of like, well, that's really quick. How come you can't do it so quick?
Yeah, I think that's the role though, isn't it? I mean, being sort of like design leaders, that's the role of leadership within a company, is to be able to find those people and sit down and educate and tell them this is the process it's going through. This is what is a concept design. This is what is a developed design. This is why this is quick, and this is why this is long, and actively try and it's difficult because everyone's really, really busy and everyone has their own responsibilities and tasks, but that sort of short-term effort of trying to find the time and space to speak with people who are really busy, in the long run, that saves so much effort, so much pain by being able to communicate to them effectively.
I think there's an interesting point there about, I actually don't have that problem because the owners of the company are product designers, so they fully get it and they understand what's involved to make a product. So the education piece isn't necessary because they understand it. However, I think there is an element of when you've got an exciting idea, there is a kind of drive to say, how quickly can we get this out, because it's super exciting. We've got to get there first. How can we do that? So even though there's an appreciation of the complexity of developing a product, there's still that pushed from the owners to the team of like, we've got to get this out. How can we do this as quickly as possible? And we've got processes in place that we follow to hit deadlines, etc. But there's always that. It's more of an excitement about the idea of like, you're right, we've kind of got this nailed now. How can we get it out as quickly as possible? So that will never go away, regardless. Even though education's not needed, there's always that desire to get it out as soon as you can. So I think it retains. Although I did have the similar, like I echo those things that you mentioned at Mothercare. It was about educating, a buying team as to how long something takes, and the not really understanding the reason why it takes so long to develop a product and go through tooling, etc. So that is definitely.
But also you get things that launch in the meantime, right? So let's say it takes 18 months to launch something, and this is probably your thing about the kind of burning hot, got to get out there, Gareth. It's like competitors can launch stuff in that time, and then obviously everyone around you is like reacting to, oh my God, they've just done this, like look at this,
Yeah.
And yet you're already on that path.
I mean, also because when say about educating people about design, like our team as such isn't actually creating any hardware. We're not creating any product, but what we're trying to do is just kind of share the principles or the process of design, so that just the business understands beyond. Like, it's not just about hardware, basically, like how they can use that process as a framework to make their process more productive, more efficient, more creative. Like, so it's a way of educating them about that as well. But yeah.
And how does AI come into this conversation? And maybe a sort of specific form of AI, which is, I guess, the sort of the type of kind of image generating sort of form of AI that people are becoming increasingly aware of, and that sort of ties into what you were sort of talking a little bit. Matt, do you think like that's going to sort of change the way, maybe not necessarily the way that we design, because I think we know that it will, but maybe like the way that you're thinking about putting products and putting designs out into the world?
I think somebody said to me recently, it's like a kind of like tailored Pinterest. So obviously all designers are familiar with kind of the Pinterest route, but basically I think AI gives you like supercharged Pinterest, and that is all it is. I think it is hugely powerful what it can do, but the stage right now is it is just controlled inspiration. On the basis particularly that you don't own that, nobody owns those images that it generates. So I think it's useful as a tool, but obviously it's going to hugely change. But a lot of people are really worried, but I think it's just something that another tool we can harness as part of our toolbox basically.
I mean, we've actually seen a lot of value in using image generation for storytelling, and actually we don't see it as a means of replacement. It's a means of improving an individual's productivity. They can do more in the time. And I mean, what we've recently had the CEO of Panasonic come to our studio space in London, and we were able to share with him lots of different activities that we're doing. And one of the elements was this. We do a lot of storyboarding, and how we could just very quickly take what is just a simple sketch, and through tools like Focus and Midjourney, how you can actually massage that into something which is a little bit more real. The challenge there is obviously, well, hang on, is that a final concept? Is that a final thing? But but we have to then be effectively communicating. But I think AI is inevitable, and just making sure that the team is ready for it.
So far, we've used it similarly to sort of speed up some processes, especially on like safety footwear. It's really handy to generate images of the final shoe just from a 2D sketch, or even to sort of do some prep for workshops and using it to generate prompts and stuff. It can really be harnessed to save time, where I would have spent hours creating like sort of user journeys of cooking a lasagna, and then you can use.
There's some amazing tools though, which I can't remember the name of it, but one of the guys that we're working with, external guys, introduced us to it. And it's basically where you almost input your way of thinking, your strategy, your tools, your vision. Yeah, and then I don't know whether this is right or wrong and could put us out of a job, but basically then your time, of course it's still really important to maintain communication and physical interaction with the team. We're 100% in the studio, but this tool can then be asked questions by the team members, and its response is as if it's asking the person who's been able to input your thinking, your strategy. So it almost becomes a way of creating like a vision, strategy, philosophy, persona that is just a really good mark of reference. Yeah. So there's lots of different ways that AI can implement itself. It's really, really fascinating.
I'm going to pull in a slightly different direction and sort of slightly build, because you were talking a little bit about your team and you all being in the office and excuse me. Take a moment.
Can I ask in the meantime?
I hope you will.
Is AI bot like a version of you and then like other team members?
It could be a version. It could be basically a persona that reflects your team's thinking principles. So you could input it with your design philosophy. You could input it with your inspiration that the team should be guided by. Input it with business principles, whatever. So it almost becomes like a bit of a Bible for your company or for your team, which is kind of
So
interesting.
it could be like the paperclip that the rest of the team are.
Yeah, the old Microsoft Word, little clippy. Yeah.
We are of the same generation.
As a journalist, I use Otter transcription, and it now joins my meetings like an assistant. It joins my meetings like an assistant. Sometimes turns up late, puts together some notes.
The key thing though, for it, like, embrace it. Like it's going to change the way that we are going to work, and I think it's our conscious effort to make sure that we, as people who are leading teams, leading companies, we have to make sure that we're on top of the game to make sure what are the tools that are going to make the biggest difference. We've got to embrace it.
But yeah, the question I was going to ask before I sort of coughed and spluttered for a moment, was to sort of go back to this idea about your teams and how you're kind of working together, and especially sort of, we're a few years out of COVID. We're at a point at which like a lot of companies are bringing staff back into the office. Some people are finding hybrid situations are working, some aren't. So I'm really interested to hear from all of you really about how, sort of at this point in time, are you managing, do you find you need to have all your team around you, or are you kind of managing hybrid situations, and how is that working? What have you learned really? Gareth, I'm going to come to you first as you're next to me.
We run a hybrid, so 3 days in the office, 2 days at home if people want it. I typically spend 5 days in the office. I feel like the best work we do is when everyone's in, but of course we kind of recognise that people want to have that flexibility, and actually it's not really a big issue for us as a business. We make it work. We actually fix the days where we're in, so we know when people are going to be around, so we can set meetings at those times. So yeah, we've just adapted to make it work. I mean, I believe the best stuff is when everyone's in, but of course you don't need that 5 days a week constantly. So we can make that work, and I think some of the team are actually choose to come in every day, but others choose to use a day at home or 2 days at home. It's just everyone's got a personal preference to it, and I think going forward, all businesses should try to in some way accommodate that, because that's what that's what people are looking for now.
What impact do you think it has on sort of, I guess, create not so much efficiency, because I guess there are always some tasks that can be better done separate from a group, but I'm, I guess, curious about kind of the kind of creative side of what you do and that kind of collaboration.
Yeah, what's interesting is actually, it's not like we're, you know, when we're in the office, we're all collaborating 24/7. It doesn't really work like that, but just naturally being next to people where you can have a conversation about something or show something, it's much better. And I often use the example of I really dislike being at home on like a Teams call when everyone else is in the office. That's like the worst scenario, where you kind of you're just a head on a screen. You just kind of get ignored.
Can't get a word in.
Well, exactly. Yeah. So in that scenario, it's much better being in the office. But yeah, we'll have like offshoots where we might go and have our brainstorm, or the team will. But just being around each other, I see that as very, very productive.
Yeah.
But it's not a fixed thing. It's not a prescribed, like, we must collaborate on this. And everyone owns their own project, so it's not. It is in a way kind of singular on that. Like, designers are responsible for their own projects, but they will collaborate with other designers to get input and help guide that project through.
I'm curious, actually. Maybe we can do like a sort of show of hands, and how many of you sort of working with your teams like have kind of a hybrid setup now?
Oh wow!
Excellent!
Everyone.
Wow, the whole room. Any not?
The company that we met.
Oh, okay. You guys are. And so,
yeah, every day in the studio.
and is that a requirement? And why? And if so, why do you do that?
Well, after COVID, I kind of threw it out to the team. Like, what do we want to do? And they all actively said, well, let's go in the studio space and be there 5 days a week. And I said, great, because that works really well with what I'd like you to do as well. Because the nature of, like, the best ideas come when you're grabbing a coffee. Like, it's not that you never come up with a great idea over a 45-minute Teams call, or you can make it better if you've got that chance of going for should we go for a quick drink after work, or let's grab some. So it's really important as well to build a strong culture for the team too.
Do you think also that has a little bit to do, you know, the nature of your team and, you know, so many of the company being based in Japan, that sort of sense of togetherness maybe is also, you know, a distinct part of your culture?
I think so. And I like to think people generally enjoy coming in as well. I mean, we do a lot of recruitment, freelancers coming in, and one of the questions they always ask is, are you hybrid or are you full-time working? And so, well, actually, we all work in the studio 5 days a week. And I would comfortably say, like, 90% of them, like, amazing. Like, that's what I want. Like, I want to be able to come to a space to be able to work with people, have conversations, be able to chat. But then the flip side is that not. Oops, sorry, I'm falling apart. The flip side of that, though, is like we have to just offer flexibility. So it's, if people do want to work from home for a day, we'll make it work. It's not like, no, you have to be here, but that's kind of what we want to do.
So the flip of this, like, we're a fully remote studio, which blows some people's minds. So basically, we started 2018, as I mentioned. We worked from home, like, collaboratively, around my kitchen table for a fair bit of time. Basically, coming up to COVID, we'd found a studio space we were going to sign, and basically we didn't because of COVID. We then basically did that period then being remote, and then basically we decided it worked so well, and we're really experienced design team, so everyone's got kind of at minimum 10 years experience. We actually found that it worked incredibly well, and my business partner lived during COVID 10 minutes away from me. We saw each other maybe twice in the first year when we basically need to do outdoor sample swapping or something. He now lives 3.5 hours north, because we were just like, do you know what, it totally works. But actually pre-COVID, we were quite embarrassed by the idea that perhaps we didn't have a studio, because we think that in design there's almost a cliche of, like, of the design, the studio, you know, like the kind of that space. And now actually when we tell people, because we go to client spaces quite a lot anyway, so ultimately that doesn't change where you work. You're still going to go to that client. But actually now businesses really get it, they really understand. Before they would have seen that as like a negative.
Out of interest, you say you've got 10 years experience, most of the team. Do you have any, like, younger designers? Could we find that?
No, so basically that is the flip, okay?
It's quite a flat structure.
Yeah, so if everyone's got, say, a minimum of 10 years, then basically you know what they're doing, you know how to communicate, you know how to basically work with them in that remote way. Whereas I do agree that if we had younger staff, especially graduates, etc., it'd be a massive challenge because basically how do you guide them in the same way?
How do you learn? Yeah.
It's not just about guiding them as well. A graduate wouldn't get a huge amount out of sitting at home. No, exactly. They're going to get so much more from immersing themselves in the office space with other designers.
It'd be very isolated, wouldn't it? Yeah. Whereas I think when you're very experienced, if you like working like that, it's hugely efficient.
Yeah.
We're full hybrid, so even though people can do whatever they want, I think most people are choosing to do 3 days in the office and 2 at home, and it's worked really well. I think, those 3 days is where we make sure all the meetings happen and we all collaborate, and then I personally find it really productive to then get on with it at home and then get back the week after. But I also think it's helped the team a lot to feel more like, I think, quality of life as well, like shaving off those commute hours for a couple of days, I think makes you feel a little, I can pick up my daughter early on Fridays and things. It just adds to quality of life as well, which can also help with creativity.
I'm curious though, actually, sort of based upon what you were sort of saying, Matt, and as a kind of counter to what you were saying, Rowan, because when we sort of talk about the benefits of hybrid and flexibility, it's mainly about, I guess, thinking about staff and kind of creating it's sort of an ingredient in kind of building a team and keeping people happy and offering them that flexibility. But I'm curious to know if there are any other, and maybe I'm going to even throw this out to the room, are there any other examples of people that have found that kind of remote or kind of hybrid situations have created more opportunities for creativity, or maybe just a different approach to design?
I don't know who here uses things like Figma. Like it's unlocked like crazy new like tools for online collaboration. I think. Miro, Figma. Like even though we're still in the studio, I think there's lots of these tools which are being used in hybrid situation, which is inspiring or making our in-office workflow a lot more productive. But don't know.
Yeah, I agree. Before Miro, we kept using like whiteboards and then photographing and putting them in folders that you then forget, and now you can have it all there, and you can collaborate, or you from home, from the office, all together, and then you have it all there recorded. You can present from that. So for me, that's been a huge shift.
And what about kind of other things? We are sort of here talking a little bit about management, about leadership. What else is kind of important you finding at the moment in terms of kind of building the right teams, building the right cultures around you? I'm going to come to you first, Gareth.
Finding the right people is the challenge for us, and we're still quite a relatively small team, even given our kind of reach, and we're kind of global company, but we're very small, and just finding the right people with the right mindset is a big challenge. And actually post-COVID has been more of a challenge trying to find people in the London area as well. People have moved away for various reasons, and so that I think that Brad will know more than me, but I think the pool is maybe slightly smaller now. That is a challenge for us to get the right people in, and we're very careful in particular about it because we want to try and retain staff as best we can. So we need to make sure we get that right.
How, and what have you found? What have you learned? Is there any kind of advice you can kind of give? In how you go about doing that?
I think it's about being really really clear on what we're looking for and what we're trying to do as a business. So we've got a real clear understanding of the skill set and the mindset that we're looking for. So when that comes in, we know that's the right person.
Does anyone else have any other thoughts on that?
I mean, recruitment is always a difficult one, tricky one, finding that right person, especially because we're a similar sort of situation. We're not a huge team in London, so that one recruit becomes almost 15% of your team. So it's a really significant percentage of what you're trying to build and do. I think that's just the importance of the leader or manager in that team is to be very clear on what type of culture you're trying to build, and finding not necessarily always the right skill set, but the right personality that can fit in that space. Because you can always train someone up, you can always train them in new skills and new direction, but it's really hard to train a new personality. So yeah, as long as you've got kind of the right way of thinking and the right kind of what's in here and what's in here, then you can always train them up. But yeah, I think this is one of the most trickiest things. It has been building a culture, like over the past 5 years, going from just 2 of us to 15 of us, has been trying to make sure that we capture the culture that reflects the Panasonic business, but then also reflects what needs to be a creative team as well. So finding a nice balance between the two is really important.
And what about kind of, well, if we're looking around the room, like diversity is clearly quite a big issue in this industry.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
I don't know if anyone are there ways about, you know, going about it to try to sort of, you know, eradicate that and to sort of stop your teams being, you know, overly male, overly white, or, you know, maybe like, or across diversity, across ages as well? Like, are there sort of, you know, are you sort of thinking differently about the way in which you recruit staff? I'm going to ask you actually this one, like, you know.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were going to pass.
I'm going to come to you first, I think, because I'm curious to know.
Well, we haven't quite recruited in a while in our team. Only very recently we had, and similar to what you were saying, we're quite a small team, so having to recruit one becomes this difficult time. But yeah, Kingfisher is really open to actively trying to make sure that we are really open to the way we recruit.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, we're like 13 of us there, and there's 3 women, including myself. So I think it's an industry-wide issue in industrial design, and I say issue, I don't know, it just comes from, I think it comes from very early, just showing interest very early already in like high school, even like studying this in university. I think even like when you look at applicants, it's quite hard to find in fact women. Yeah.
And what led you, as you know, you're a woman in a very male-dominated space, like, was this sort of something you must have been aware of, and maybe sort of something that you kind of...
You know what? It's crazy, because only until very recently, I did a talk actually here not very long ago with organized by Studio Woods called Women in Innovation, and it wasn't until then that I actually realized that there weren't that many of us. Crazy, isn't that crazy? And it's not until I met like Kirsty, who was also part of the panel, that I realized that there's not that many women, but also not that many mothers. And I stayed in touch a lot with her because I learned a lot about how, like I asked her on advice on how to sort of be a leader and be a mother, which is not easy. And there's not that many people you can speak about that in industrial design.
What are the real challenges of that? Like,
Ooh.
I mean, obviously, I guess it's a different thing, right? That just being a designer and being a mother, and then but being a leader and being, you know, actually...
Yeah. I mean, it shouldn't be just being a mother. It should be a leader and being a parent, right? But yeah, for me, it's been, especially the last year, just sort of changing how I go about things. I think especially as a leader, that line of managing and letting go, and empowering the teams to continue doing the work you are sort of directing them to do and coaching them to do, and letting go, also thinking about your health, because in my particular case, I was trying to put like my 100% on everything, and I think you need to bring in that balance big time between leadership and your personal life, including parenthood.
Any other team have any sort of experiences of dealing? Rowan, you're nodding.
Yeah. I mean, we don't actively try and make sure that there is a 50-50 balance in the studio, but there is. And I think it's more just making sure that there's a diversity of personnel in the team that are reflective of a diversity of different voices. And that doesn't need to be us actively having to try and make sure that there's a equal split or a division. But it's important. But then I think we have to go back to the root of education as well in schools too, because perfectly honest, when I get applicants through, the proportion of applicants as well is well imbalanced. So it's really difficult if you're simply just looking for really great talent and you're getting 100 portfolios through, but only 15 of them are from, if the conversation of a female talent, then it's really difficult. But then we need to be feeding the design system with more talent from a younger age.
It's
Yeah, I
interesting
think
though,
that's the problem.
I sort of an anecdote I guess I might share, which maybe has relevance here, but this is from the architecture space, but I know a practice that they have a policy because they know that they seem to be very male heavy, and they seem to attract a lot of men. They sort of have a policy which is, if they have a viable female candidate, they'll always bring her in, even if on paper she doesn't look as good as the men, just to say, let's just give someone another opportunity to be in a room and just, just a second chance to sort of shine above everyone else. It's not so much about saying they would hire someone that isn't as good, but it's just sort of saying, having a little bit more of a platform to try that a little bit harder to kind of improve diversity in the organisation.
I think that's important anyway, that when you're thinking of trying to get young guys and young girls into the industry, that you need people that they can aspire to be and aspire to become. So I can understand that being really valuable as well. It's sort of placing people to be figureheads, to be able to inspire, the younger audience. Absolutely, yeah.
I'm suddenly conscious that the time is running on a little bit, and no one in the audience has said very much yet. So I'm going to sort of come back and see whether anyone has any thoughts on this that topic we've just been talking about, or any others. Don't be afraid to raise your hand if you have a question.
I got one.
Do you want to grab the mic there, if that's all right, just as we're recording, so we can hear you properly.
We've kind of touched on the subject a little bit earlier on, but I think one of the roles that obviously you're taking is, yes, you have your teams that you're working with, but also whether it's C-suite above you or board of directors, there's a conversation, there's a narrative there about the value of design and how that is clearly communicated to them so that they understand. We touched on it earlier, but what is the best way to achieve that? Because ultimately with every other component of the business, whether it's sales, marketing, manufacture, everything can be measured. With design, it's a little bit more ambiguous. What's the best way to communicate that to C-suite, board of directors?
Is your question to anyone in particular?
Open, whoever has the best answer.
Who would like to jump in?
I think you need to keep it's trial and error. I think if I think about how I've been trying to do it at Kingfisher, it's been just trying lots of different avenues, because I think its company and its personality are different, and each challenge is different. Companies evolve, challenges change. So I would say the most effective way has always been trying to explain it with examples, whether it's other examples, whether it's you generating speculative design or concepts to prove the example of how some strategy is going to pan out. That tends to, and get to the point. I feel like a lot of the time we've bored people trying to explain everything we've done, because we do so much and we care so much. Unless you get to the point quickly, they're gonna just, they're gonna just lose interest. So I think it's about, yes, still show in a succinct way how much work is gone into it, because it's important, but just try to get to the point, and examples and visuals tend to be something that's worked for us.
Yeah, I think it's the fourth pillar of the storytelling part. It's because it is such a qualitative kind of value of when you're speaking to CEOs who speak with heads of finance, seeing the figures, seeing the turnover. We have to rely on really convincing storytelling so that they can trust us to make a judgment, make a direction, and their perception of our success is probably seeing the wider team receive it, the wider team behaving positively or reacting positively to our impact, and kind of seeing maybe more of like a cultural shift or the way that people are working slightly differently. So yeah, it is really difficult to kind of quantify or say this is what you need to do, but it's just time, effort, conversation, and just really convincing storytelling that will get them on board. And they have to take a bit of a plump in us as well. They have to trust that what we're saying is right, and they believe in what we're trying to do. And if they can do that, then it's down to us just to crack on.
Case studies, previous successes, and also
External validation as well, right? In terms of whether it be consumers, users, installers, etc. That kind of feedback is really useful, and I think often for businesses that is how they get their validation, which is sometimes if nobody's talking about it, it must be good, because typically they often talk about it more when it's bad.
Yeah, please. You grab the mic if you can.
Thanks. I just find it, I guess, a little disappointing, and the theme was in Nick's talk as well, that we're still having to defend ourselves, we're still having to educate an awful lot. And I'm wondering whether you see other departments and teams having to do that senior leadership too. And if they're not, why not? What can we learn from?
Yeah. No, I don't think other divisions necessarily do that as much. But I must say, I think we've kind of, with our task in Panasonic, we've done the right thing now, and actually it's kind of well established. So that's kind of phase one is over. But I think it's just if they pick up a newspaper, it's just how we brand ourselves as a design industry as well. It's really important. If they pick up a newspaper and it's the Financial Times, it's something that they can relate with and they understand the numbers. But if they pick up a paper and it's talking about design in a way that maybe doesn't feel like it's got economic sense or viability, and just talking about the more art side of design, it kind of plays with the way that they perceive it. So they need convincing, because they've read something in media or press, or they've watched something, or they've visited a design show where it was more art focused rather than process design. So we're really good at speaking to ourselves, basically. As designers, we're really great self-referential, really great communicating, but then it's how do we brand ourselves so that the C-suite level truly understand what we mean and what we are.
sometimes also design can be seen as elitist. I think people might think that all we're doing is just trying to make things more expensive, or just trying to, that we're a bit snobby. And I think, especially in Kingfisher, it's been for us quite a challenge, because it's all about affordability and it's all about democratizing design. And luckily, we've been able to prove that we can actually design with within those cost constraints. But it's about showing how you can actually be quite humble and listen and take their thinking on board as well. I think from the moment we tried to bring humility to the team, it made our conversations easier.
It's ultimately a branding exercise, right? Sort of the idea of shifting this idea of designer's style or sort of surface to something that is about problem solving, which perhaps this industry in other countries is much more, what people understand design is.
Yeah. Is it more about value generation then? Surely it's not, I don't know, it's branding exercise. I don't disagree, I'm just on process.
It's about learning to articulate our value in language that they understand.
Yeah.
When I was listening to Nick earlier talking about the pressure on the design time in a process, I think if you can respond by saying, yeah, sure, we can do that quicker, but what it's going to do is it's going to increase risk. If you can frame the consequences in language that non-designers understand, then I think that's a better way about it.
All about quantifying, and to a degree.
Yeah, or at least explaining what the implications are, because often it's not quite as finite as that. It might just be, yes, we can do it faster, but that will carry increased risk. You don't necessarily have to put a number on that.
Yeah. I can ask you to pass the mic back this way for a question back here. Thank you.
I was going to add something to that, which I think has helped me in the past, is when people understand marketing and sales very well, they understand design. Sorry. Is trying to explain that if the design process is done right, you make the marketing and sales jobs a lot easier. And that's a very simplistic way of explaining it, but basically whenever I've said that, it's kind of resonated with those departments. And then when you prove it, once you've got it for the rest of the projects going forward, it sort of helps a lot. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more to that, but simplistically, that's how it's worked for me, you know, and yeah, like process is so abstract as well, so when we talk amongst ourselves, you can't really explain it, so you can't quantify it, like you said. Sorry, I'm losing my voice.
Not just me.
I've got a crumb in my throat. But yeah, you can't quantify that, but you can quantify marketing and sales, so you can kind of prove it indirectly. You just need one or two projects to prove your point.
There's an external as well, it's quite interesting. So sometimes our like key stakeholder can be marketing and sales, so they're the person that wants design, and then sometimes it's engineering. So basically, then for us, it's like a real kind of seesaw between like trying to keep both parties happy, because you're basically trying to deliver very much on the marketing and sales, but also trying to often pacify the engineers, you're not making their job harder.
Sorry, I ended up with the mic. I also have.
You have a question as well, that's great.
We started off this conversation talking about sort of finance directors, finance teams and marketing teams and whatnot, not having these sort of constraints, shall we say, or being able to have that conversation more easily. If things go wrong in finance, there are consequences, and finance teams and teams that typically work with quantitative data are held to some pretty hard and fast requirements. I suppose, yes, we all want to have as much time to design the best thing that we can, but in a world where funding and investment is becoming more challenging to get, how do we challenge ourselves as engineers and design teams to try and push to go faster as well? We can't take forever to release a product, and we simply can't always have these startups that are funded forever and a day without making a profit and then ending up in this loop-the-loop of redundancies. Having gone through to myself, it's not a pleasant experience, and I think there's a responsibility on leadership to ensure that that doesn't happen as well.
Do any of you want to respond to that?
I think you're generally right. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. I think just to touch back on the other question, I think talking about defending ourselves and different departments not having to do it, I think in any good business, I think any department should have to defend what it is what their rationale is. So I don't think it's an isolated issue within design. I think it's about departments demonstrating where they're going to spend budget or have a plan, and they've got to have a rationale behind that, and it's the same for design. So it's really down to the individuals running the teams to explain to the board or the company owners or the director, whichever department you're in, your rationale and why it's valid and why it will make a difference and why they should spend their money on it, basically. So I think it's not unique to design, in my experience anyway. It's slightly different how you might educate or how you might talk about it, but ultimately every department should be pushed to say, why do you want to do it this way, or what's your rationale for this?
Accountability.
Exactly, yeah.
I think to your point, I was thinking about it, and I think earlier we were saying, yes, people can ask you, can you do it in the 50% of the time or 70% of the time? I think we also have the ability to show options, right? I think we can say, if you want to do it in this timeline, this is what you're going to get. If you're going to do it in this is what you're going to get. Especially in Kingfisher, we tend to do like pretty big projects, like big sort of range reviews, so you can do things like phasing things or get like, that's worked for us quite well. You can say, we can do with this amount of time, this is what you can do, and then we can work on sort of future-proofing that and launching the rest. So then you can work out options to make sure you are still delivering.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe our team's in a bit of a luxury where physical thing. It's delivering a way of thinking or a strategy. So actually a lot of our clients, internal people, are actually probably coming to us and saying, well, how long do you think this will take? So we're able to actively be a little bit more vocal with the briefing process rather than just kind of reacting to people's needs and demands. So yeah, maybe not so much of an issue for ourselves, but.
And I think, like, externally as an agency, I think it's such a competitive marketplace. If you basically weren't offering that value, everything that customer wants basically from that engagement, you wouldn't get repeat business, and as a business you wouldn't last. I think that's perhaps, I haven't got much in-house experience, but I think that's probably the biggest difference, is that you're continuously under review. You haven't got basically any comfort zone, if you like. It's basically you're only as good as your last job.
Do we have any more questions? I feel we need to wrap up quite soon. Well, suddenly there's a lot of hands.
Hi. I just want to ask about decision making in terms of, various decisions that get made through the process. I mean, I'm kind of pushed in my team to, use a lot of data, but I sort of tend to find data versus opinion. It's opinion's kind of getting lost. It's one of those things where you always have to back everything with data, and it almost sort of like takes responsibility of some of the decision makers. And I'm kind of trying to fight that, sometimes experience does trump data, because data can be interpreted in multiple different ways. And I just wonder, in your design teams, how do you manage that balance between, making decisions by data and making it by your opinion, your experience?
That's a great question.
I don't think it should all be data-driven. I think that's not going to give you any differentiation, right? I think you need to have some element of data-driven and then some of your intuition, which you use in the context of your strategic framework. So you've set up all your company values and strategy sort of intents and ambitions, and you have to use your intuition to put that data through your own filters and come to your own conclusion. Otherwise, you are just being really reactive, whereas you need to bring your own experience and intuitions in combination with that data. That's when you're going to create something special, I think.
I think it comes down to trust in the team as well. So we use both. We use some data, and depending on the project, to what level, but I think it's about trusting the team and the judgment of the team and the intuition of the team. And then as a senior team, we're reviewing projects and making decisions, in some cases without data, but it's on previous experience or instinct or intuition. So it's actually quite a difficult question to answer, because it depends on the scenario and the project where we might use that. But
do you find when senior leadership is sort of like almost trying to justify a route forward or some sort of decision on a product, but the only thing they can truly, data is tangible in a way more than someone's opinion is? Do you know what I mean? How do you justify that to, let's say, people who are literally, let's say, holding the purse strings, or really, responsible or accountable for the outcome of the project? When it's sort of like you just have to trust the fact that I've been in the business for X amount of years, or I've done a project like this.
Sure, I think it's some of it may be the historical projects that have happened in the past. I think I kind of mentioned earlier, I don't have that same issue, because the guys who run the business are product designers, so there's a slightly different dynamic there. But I think it often comes back to the amount of research that you've done that might not be data driven, but might be actually interacting with people in their own homes, those kind of things. There's lots of different things at play. So each thing on their own is maybe not enough, but all combined together might help to guide to the right decision in the end.
I think definitely resonate with that, is that actually maybe it's the nature of the projects we deliver again, but the decision making is aided by us getting opinions from external expertise to kind of validate or kind of provide an opinion on the activity that we're doing too. So it's not just a Panasonic Design London Flux proposal, but actually it's being validated by some external expertise who's been able to come in, and most of the time who are more expert on the subject than what we are as well. And by getting that external perspective on it is sometimes enough just to get it over the line. It's just eliminating risk. It's just trying to make the concept or the idea as waterproof as possible. And
building the case.
Ethnography, user research, you don't necessarily need the numbers behind it, but that's expert interviews has been something which has been really useful for ourselves.
Yeah. I'm conscious we're a little bit over, so I'm going to say maybe one, if we have one more. Okay.
It'll be quick. Just on the value of design, I'd be really grateful to know in Kingfisher ultimately where that seed of building in internal team sort of came from, because I guess there was perhaps a recognition that an internal team would bring value to the business rather than the ID team having to communicate that back to a business.
Yeah, I think that it really came from them believing that they had enough sort of knowledge and expertise in the team to really start creating the products themselves, and that would lead them to create differentiation to ensure that customers come to our stores for our products, and also in an effort to make home improvement affordable to everyone, which is the company ambition, and being able to provide in-house products allow us to have that control over the prices as well.
Thank you.
Great. I think the best thing we can do now is maybe to wrap up, and if anyone has any further questions, please come and chat to the panelists in person and we can continue the conversation. So all that's left for me to do is say thank you to all of you and for all of you to coming. And I hope you'll stay in a little longer and chat to us a little bit more. And thank you to Brad, of course, for organising Design Tree.
I should probably thank a few people as well whilst I'm here. Thank you to our hosts, James and Lauren. I think Lauren made this.
Then I've gone to a meeting.
Meeting?
Meeting?
Yes.
It's US time.
It's not a good endorsement for Charlotte. To be honest. But thank you for giving up our space. To TDCPR, Chloe, James. James is gone. Everyone's just gone. To their assistants as well. But also just on a personal level, I travel way too far. It's quite often the better not see my miles that I put in to go to these events. But on my personal level, I do appreciate everyone that kind of comes down and travels a great distance to come to these things. Hayley, Chloe from Birmingham, we've got Craig from Bristol. You're all probably scrambling around thinking, oh, what's going to shove into the train. So on a personal level, thank you very much for coming, even if you have come from, I don't know, East London or something. I really appreciate it. Thanks everyone.